A young woman preparing for the most important exam of her life suddenly finds herself in an unexpected fight to save a life. Yet this brave act doesn't just save someone, it opens the door to a journey that will change her own destiny. Was this exam merely about academic success? Or was fate crafting a different story for Rachel and Ethan? Don't miss the inspiring conclusion to this unforgettable tale. Rachel, 26, was a determined young woman chasing a bright future in engineering. She had graduated with honors from a prestigious engineering university, but instead of jumping straight into a job, she continued studying to seize an opportunity that could take her even further. Her financial resources were limited, but Rachel had big goals: to get accepted into one of the top graduate programs in her field and prove herself as a professional engineer. Getting into this institute required more than just technical knowledge. It demanded discipline and perseverance. The institute only admitted the brightest minds, and Rachel was well aware of that. She wanted to build an academic career, to be part of the engineering projects she dreamed of, to conduct scientific research, and perhaps one day even teach students. This exam could unlock the door to all those dreams. With only one day left until the exam, Rachel was making her final preparations. She had spent hours in the library, reviewing countless pages of notes and redoing practice problems over and over. She was exhausted, but her desire to reach her goal kept her motivated. Just one more day, she thought. This last day could change everything. At midnight, Rachel finally decided to leave the library. She walked through the cold streets of the city back to her small, modest apartment. Turning on the lights, she sat at her desk, looking at the textbooks and notes scattered around her. If she succeeded in getting into this school, she wouldn't just gain access to one of the best educational programs in her field. She'd also benefit from the institute's scholarships and housing opportunities. That meant she could finally stop being a financial burden on her family. Taking a deep breath, Rachel reflected on the sacrifices she'd made throughout her life. She sometimes felt guilty for not taking a job to help her family financially, but she knew that achieving this goal would ultimately benefit both her and her family in the long run. Just one step left, she murmured. After tomorrow, everything could change. When she closed her eyes, she envisioned the exam room and the peaceful moment that success would bring. As snow silently fell outside, Rachel's excitement and determination grew, building alongside the quiet snowstorm. Rachel took a shower and went to bed early. The next day, she'd be taking what might be the most important exam of her life. She planned to get there early to stay sharp and ensure she wouldn't miss it. Exhaustion had taken over her body, and despite her swirling thoughts, she fell asleep quickly. The next morning, she woke up early. As planned, she ate a quick breakfast and checked her bag. The sun was barely up. The streets were dim and quiet. Did I really need to leave this early? She wondered, but immediately reassured herself. It's better to wait there than risk being late. The cold air hit her face as she walked down the street. When she got to the subway station, it was almost empty except for a few people. She'd never seen it this quiet before. Shortly after, her train arrived and she got on, placing her bag on the seat next to her. Taking a deep breath, she whispered to herself, "I'm ready for this." At the next stop, an elderly man got up and stepped off the train. Rachel found herself watching him instinctively. After taking a few steps on the platform, the man suddenly stopped. He clutched his chest and loosened his scarf. The scene triggered something in Rachel's mind. I've seen this before. She remembered her father reacting the same way 5 years ago when he had a heart attack. Panic set in. "Help!" she shouted as she rushed off the train. The man had collapsed and was struggling to breathe. Rachel crouched beside him, quickly assessing the situation. Her first aid training from years ago, after her father's heart attack, came flooding back. She carefully positioned the man to make him more comfortable, checking his pulse and breathing. His consciousness was slipping away. Looking around, she saw that the subway had departed, and they were completely alone. Taking a deep breath, Rachel began chest compressions. She kept repeating to herself, 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths, meticulously following the techniques she'd learned. After several cycles, she felt his pulse and breathing returning faintly. Relief washed over her, but she knew her job wasn't done. She dashed up the stairs and flagged down the first person she saw. "Help! Someone's having a heart attack. Call 911, she shouted. A man out for a morning jog, Ethan, noticed her urgency. He quickly pulled out his phone, called 911 and described their location. Then he followed Rachel back down to the platform. The elderly man was still unconscious but had a pulse. Ethan carefully lifted him and carried him outside, laying him down on the sidewalk. Soon, the sound of ambulance sirens filled the air. Paramedics arrived and swiftly began treating the man before loading him into the ambulance. Amid the chaos, Rachel and Ethan climbed in too. At the hospital, the paramedics wheeled the man into the ER. Rachel took a deep breath, but then a sudden realization hit her. "My bag," she muttered. Her bag was still on the train, containing all the documents and ID she needed for the exam. She felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured over her. Her knees buckled and her breathing grew shallow. "The exam?" she whispered, barely audible. Ethan noticed her distress and steadied her by the arm. "What's wrong? What's going on?" he asked, trying to calm her down. Rachel leaned against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, noticing her trembling hands. Rachel struggled to speak, her throat tight. "My bag. I left it on the subway," she said in a faint voice. "For the exam. My ID, all my documents. They're in the bag." Ethan's face froze for a moment, then he sprang into action. "Which subway line? Which station?" he asked urgently. Rachel, overwhelmed with panic and helplessness, quickly told him the line and the station name. Ethan pulled out his phone and started looking up the subway line. "Listen," he said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I get it, but take a deep breath. I'll handle this." Rachel nodded, trying to hold back her tears. As Ethan called the subway's customer service and explained the situation, he kept one eye on her, making sure she didn't break down. Rachel covered her face with her hands and took deep breaths. "If they don't find my bag, I won't be able to take the exam," she said in a muffled voice. Ethan hung up the phone and turned to her. "They said they'd do everything they could to find it. Don't worry. Life has a way of leading us down unexpected paths, with every step unfolding a new story. If this tale captivated you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss out on more." Still, Ethan knew time was tight. Then an idea struck him. "Wait," he said. "My friend works security for the subway." Rachel's eyes lit up with hope. Ethan immediately called his friend and explained the situation. Just then a nurse approached them. "Are you related to the patient?" she asked. "No," Rachel said, "but I found him and gave first aid before calling the ambulance." "We don't know him." She hesitated, then asked, "Is he okay?" The nurse smiled and nodded. "Yes, you did a great job. He's stable. We'll need to run some tests, but he's going to be fine." "You saved a life," she said, smiling warmly at both Rachel and Ethan before walking away. Rachel felt a wave of relief. She hadn't realized her first aid training would one day save someone's life. She took a deep breath, but her mind quickly returned to her own dilemma. This was still the most important day of her life. Ethan turned to her, phone in hand. "What time and where's your exam?" he asked. Rachel immediately gave him the details. Ethan checked his watch. "We've still got an hour." "Perfect," he said confidently. Rachel hesitated. "But my bag," she started. Ethan cut her off. "Don't worry. My friend's calling in favors. Let's head to where we're meeting him." He flagged down a taxi and gave the driver an address, gently guiding Rachel into the car. Rachel, caught up in her panic and worry, hadn't fully noticed how quick and resourceful Ethan had been. But deep down she thought, the way he stepped up like this is rare. No one else would have done this. A little while later they arrived at a park where Ethan's friend appeared, holding Rachel's bag. Tears streamed down her face as she took the bag. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "Let's get you to your exam," Ethan said, raising his hand to hail another taxi. Turning to his friend he said, "Catch you later, man." Before he could react, Rachel threw her arms around Ethan, tears still flowing. He was caught off guard but understood completely. Rachel and Ethan got into the taxi. Taking a deep breath, Rachel said, "I don't even know how to thank you. I still can't believe I forgot my bag." Ethan smiled and replied, "You were saving someone's life, Rachel. Do you realize that thanks to you, someone is alive right now?" Then he added, "But all this adrenaline isn't the best prep for an exam. Try to calm down before we get there." Rachel nodded and stared out the window. Ethan couldn't help but admire her determination and bravery. She had jumped off the subway without hesitation to save a man's life, even forgetting about her crucial exam in the process. That kind of courage left Ethan in awe. After a moment of hesitation, he reached over and gently held her hand. "Feeling better?" he asked. Rachel smiled softly. "Yeah, I'm feeling better. I'm ready, I've got this," she said confidently. Ethan replied, "I have no doubt." Then with a curious look asked, "So, what's this exam all about?" Rachel began enthusiastically explaining in academic terms, but Ethan laughed and interrupted, Alright, I get it, it's something super important. Rachel chuckled. Oh, sorry. I'm an engineer, and this is the most important exam of my life. Just then the taxi pulled up in front of an impressive building. Ethan quickly paid the fare before getting out. Please let me pay, Rachel insisted, but Ethan waved her off. As they stepped out, Ethan looked up at the building in awe. Wow, this really is a big deal, he said. Rachel smiled. Yes, if I pass this exam I'll be studying here. As Rachel walked toward the entrance, Ethan stood back watching her. Everything had happened so quickly. But her courage and determination were remarkable. He couldn't shake the growing admiration he felt for her and silently wished her success in the exam. Ethan decided to wait until Rachel finished her exam. The exam lasted for hours and Ethan settled into the sleek cafe inside the building. As he glanced around he thought, I've never seen a school like this in my life. The place was incredible, exuding prestige and importance from every corner. Hours passed. Ethan, growing restless, kept checking the time until he suddenly heard a voice. Ethan? He turned to see Rachel standing there, her face blank as if in shock. His heart began to race. Please let it have gone well, he thought. How did it go? He asked. Rachel stood silently for a moment before tears welled up in her eyes. It was amazing, she said, her voice breaking. Ethan burst out laughing. Then what's with that face? You did it, he said, pulling her into a tight hug. Rachel, still reeling from the whirlwind of events, felt a wave of relief wash over her. She knew the exam had gone well, and that certainty brought her peace. Her instinct was proven right the next day when the news arrived. Rachel had been accepted into the institute, ranking first. She immediately called Ethan to share the news. On the phone, she excitedly talked about her scholarship, the projects she would work on, and her dreams. She was speaking so quickly that Ethan had to interrupt her. Rachel, come downstairs, he said. What? Rachel asked, confused. Ethan laughed. You told me which building you live in yesterday. Don't worry, I'm not stalking you. Rachel quickly threw on a jacket and rushed downstairs. Standing in front of her building, Ethan was waiting with a bouquet of flowers in his hands. Surprised but smiling, Rachel looked at him. Ethan grinned. We can't let this accomplishment go uncelebrated, he said. In that moment, Rachel realized this was just the beginning of an incredible journey. What started as admiration had created an undeniable bond between them. It was love at first sight and both of them knew it. As Rachel took the flowers from Ethan, her heart raced. Ethan's warm smile and the genuine kindness in his demeanor reassured her that everything was just as it should be. Thank you, Rachel said, her eyes brimming with tears, this time tears of happiness. Ethan chuckled softly. I told you I'd always have your back, he said. Rachel smiled and replied, I know. In that moment, they both realized they were stepping into a new chapter of their lives. They walked together along the quiet path in the park. The wind gently stirred the leaves, making them dance, while Rachel and Ethan felt a shared excitement for the opportunities and adventures that lay ahead. This exam wasn't just the beginning of Rachel's academic journey, it marked the start of a story where two hearts had found each other. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and follow us for more inspiring stories. See you in the next one.